Hello, everyone. Hopefully, this doesn't turn into a massively controversial video because I am not prepared to defend anything that I say today. That's not true. Let's come out strong and defend it powerfully. Okay, I am going to make the case that the early church fathers were the Proto-Preterists. That's right. That's right. You ever seen Alien, Prometheus? The robot makes the kind of proto-xenomorphs and stuff. That's who the early church fathers were. They were just perfecting preterism. So that's what we're going to get into today. Now, if you're not of the mind where you're open to believing in full preterism, your initial reaction to this video will be one of great skepticism. But I've been thinking philosophically and deeply about why we have this resistance. Obviously, there's various psychological reasons. Okay, there's affiliations and attachments to things that we're brought up with and taught to believe are true. And there's this in-group, out-group preference, right, where we see the other and we might think of them a little bit more suspiciously, a little bit more skeptically, like what are their intentions, what are they all about, what motivates them. And we do a lot of that today. We do a lot of reasoning today. You've heard of Gad Saad, perhaps, and he wrote a book called The Parasitical Mind. You might have heard of Jordan Peterson and how he talks about ideological possession, where we're always thinking about why do we think the way we think. And one of Jordan Peterson's points is, do you really think? Are you actually thinking? Or are you someone who is just saying particular sound bites? Have you been programmed like an algorithm? Is your thinking captured? And one of the best means to capture thinking is through fear, punitive measures, the idea that you're not allowed to express or search something out because there will be consequences to doing that. And some people reflect on the current state of the United Kingdom and think, well, it looks quite harsh what's going on, because every day in this country, there's people having their throats slit open or stabbed, or just a litany of horrors are happening, not so much in Scotland, but in England. And the people who are angry about it are being presented, the narrative is they're racist, they're bigots, these are terrible far-right people. And I can understand that some of it will be that. There will be some people who are that. But there's also going to be a body of people who are upset and scared and are noticing this great change, and they want some kind of, I don't know, they just want to be heard. They want to be told, look, I know what you're feeling. And people have pointed out that we did that with Black Lives Matter, and we did that with Just Stop Oil to a certain point until they went a bit too crazy. Like, destroying Stonehenge. They never destroyed Stonehenge, but it offended a lot of people when he spray painted it. But there have been these social movements that have both attracted skepticism and criticism, but also had a empathy expressed towards them. Anyways, I bring that up because grand narratives sort of steer history. And one of the narratives that I'm going to be butting up against today is that of church history. Oh, let's get into it. Hello, Sonic Grace. Nice to see you today. Thank you for checking this out. Don't feel obligated to hang around, as I say, doing live streams, pop in and off, catch it later. But it's always nice to see people pop in and say hello. So I just want to stop off on a note of intellectual humility, just to say that, look, I know that I am also perhaps bound and wrapped in a web of experiences and ways of thinking and styles that might make my pursuit of truth inelegant. And I think that is a purely human thing, the inelegance of our search for truth, right? You ever seen a moth attracted to the light? You ever seen the flight path of a moth? Is it some beautiful, soft, delicate, precise, owl-like swoop? No. The moth flutters around and it's warping around as it gets itself towards the light. And I think that's the human path. We're like moths. We can see the light. We desire to approach it. But our path is sometimes curvaceous, voluptuous, if you will. And bats may be trying to eat us as we pursue the light. But, it's irresistible to us all. So the intellectual humility is just to say that, and to say that what I mean to do, if I might give you the genesis of all this, like the foundation that I'm working on here. I'm not starting, I have not started this pursuit of truth with strong convictions that I then sought to fortify, okay, without ever sufficiently investigating them. That's not what I did. That's not what my pursuit of faith is. Yes, I was. I was the most, I don't know, conservative Christian you would ever find. The earth was 6,000 years old. Evolution's a lot of nonsense. Everything's literal and understood literally. Jesus returns in the future, possibly very soon. The most conservative, most backwoods, the most sweet home Alabama. No offense. I'm from rural Scotland. This is where Alabama started. Right. There's just the most, you know what I mean, small-minded possible. That was who I was. That's my starting ground, because I wanted to believe in this most purest distilled form of the faith. And I thought no one would ever lie. Very naively, I thought no one would ever lie, or that people couldn't be wrong who operated in the space of religion. So it never really occurred to me to initially be skeptical and cynical. No, I was very innocent, naive, and thought these are, well, all the good people associate with God, right? And then you learn about the human spirit. You live long enough to see yourself do terrible things. I will never confess to where the bodies are buried. Only joking. There are no buried bodies. I ate them. Only joking. That never happened either. But I want to start off with intellectual humility, is what I'm saying. So rather, I seek to vigorously test the beliefs. I want to acknowledge the weaknesses. I want to adapt to the face of new evidence, okay? I want to seek out this light, like a moth, but orientated that way. And so I looked to the early church fathers and I thought, what's going on there? Because obviously, in the preterist belief, everything is fulfilled. All prophecy is fulfilled. That's what I am, okay? Doesn't mean there isn't still wisdom to be gleaned and that the Bible doesn't speak to things that happen in the world today in some secondary sense. But the primacy of prophecy and its fulfillment, I believe that was met in the first century. These are the days of vengeance, that all things written shall be fulfilled. Okay. So I got thinking about Eusebius. Okay. And Eusebius of Caesarea, he lived 260 to 339 AD. And I found a paper, which I will now share with you over here. Let's share this tab. Let's look over here. We've got some names, good information. Okay, thank you, Calvin. Good to see you, man. No way we as human beings misunderstand, misinterpret. Oh, I know, right? There's no way we could misunderstand it. All right, so I found this. I'll just throw it up like that. So it's a paper, and in this paper, it talks about what's going on in the scholarship, right? I'm not going to stick into this for too long, but let's just give ourselves a little bit of insight. You know what I mean? That's the intellectual, scholarly thing to do. So in this paper here, which actually critiques the point that I'm trying to make, so that's how fair and balanced I'm trying to be, we have another look at the eschatology of Eusebius. So why would we ever need to look there? Well, Thielman goes into it. There is something like a consensus in contemporary Eusebian scholarship that the first church historian, which is Eusebius, was flexible on questions of eschatology. When the persecutions of Maximin called for the more primitive apocalyptic conceptions of traditional Christianity, Eusebius was willing to use them. But with the triumph of Christianity at the Milvian Bridge, he conveniently shelved otherworldly aspirations and praised with unconcealed joy the establishment of God's rule on earth in the form of Constantine's emperor. So I'm not a very knowledgeable on some of these events, but I think they speak to the events in the lifetimes of Eusebius and how Eusebius's eschatology conformed to his time. And We'll speak more on that in a minute. But this guy here, we'll just call him Mr. Italian name, speaks for many when he says that Eusebius never allows the doctrine of Christ's second coming any importance in his historical scheme. There is no sense of a new kingdom which will at some future date break in upon the existing historical structure, righting what is wrong and establishing justice. Rather, Serenili's statement, sorry, I can't speak French or whatever that is there, right? But basically just kind of says the same idea. His statement is impressive in its refusal to equivocate. His strong language is perhaps surprising, but he is not alone in his convictions. So we have Friend and Wallace Hadrill, and to some extent Barnes agree with him. When Eusebius' statements on the second appearing are reread, however, before notions of his philosophy of history have become fixed in the reader's mind, a different picture of Eusebius' attitude toward the second coming, the next life, and the role of Constantine empire emerges. The difference is not sweeping, but it is significant, and therefore the exercise of re-examining Eusebius with eschatological questions in mind is an intellectual healthy one. Anyway, he's just kind of pointing out here that in the scholarship, there's the idea that Eusebius kind of saw Constantine's rule as, you know, the peak towards which all human history had been moving, and placed correspondingly little weight on traditional eschatology. Now, of course, this is debated, right? It's debated because we don't know for sure that, you know, Eusebius was a preterist. Well, he certainly wasn't a preterist. That would be too strong language. That's why I use the term proto-preterist. But certainly it looks to many scholars that Eusebius was perhaps not so cemented into the idea of a literal second coming. I don't want to state that too strongly, because in his later writings, while he does kind of veer away from the mention of the second coming, it's not completely gone. And given that there is evidence that he does speak of it, it would be too bold a thing to say that he never, or he had completely abandoned it. However, some might say it was just lip service at that point, and that he was what they would call a realized preterist. Not a realized preterist, but a subscriber of realized eschatology. That's the term I meant to state powerfully and emphatically, but got wrong. Okay, so realized eschatology. This is the belief that many eschatological prophecies are already fulfilled in the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus, and in the establishment of the church. So the core beliefs of realized eschatology are that the kingdom of God is already present, but not fully consummated, that many prophecies, particularly those related to the coming of the kingdom, are seen as fulfilled, but there are still some aspects where some people will, you know, anticipate the second coming. But I think we should discuss that point, how the arrival of the kingdom and the second coming of Christ are neatly tied together. And then there's an emphasis on living out the implications of the fulfilled prophecies in the present, which I think is a wonderful idea. So we certainly see some of that coming out of Eusebius's work, but he certainly highlighted how the destruction of Jerusalem, the temple, Israel, was a pivotal event in his work, the ecclesiastical history. So I want to move on and touch on a little bit of Clement of Alexandria. I'll just touch on a little bit of his work. Dean Floyd, thank you. Thank you for the lovely, encouraging words. Arkansas? Yeah, Arkansas. If you're not from America and you see that, you say Arkansas sometimes. Yeah, thank you so much, man. Thank you so much. That means a lot. So, Clement of Alexandria, he's a little bit earlier. He's 150 to 215 AD, and he emphasizes allegory. Okay, so he takes a spiritual and moral take of some eschatological passages. Again, it would be too bold a thing to assert that Clement of Alexandria was a full preterist. He wasn't. It would be wrong to say that. That's the intellectual humility. As wonderful as it might feel for me to try and squeeze him into that box, it can't be done. It's like bathing a cat. It wouldn't work out. However, we do see the emphasis on allegory, and we might wonder as to why he's doing that. Why is he leaning on the allegory? And so I think we have this idea from him that the authority and that the reign, these events unfolded in the 1st century, and that there's a certain potency to that. The way he describes it, the way he goes into allegory and the spiritualizing of the text. This is often an allegation that's made against preterists. You're spiritualizing. Okay, well, here's someone that was quite comfortable doing that. The examples are very clunky. I took out some text to look at, but it's not an elegant thing to chop through in a video. All I can say is that he did speak in those terms, and that it lends a little bit more credence to this proto-preterist idea, but he's not the most important one to look at. We're going to skip by it because we're going to land on Origen of Alexandria, okay, 184 to 253, I believe. And he's a big one for spiritualizing of eschatology. So he's looking at Matthew 24, and he's focusing on the spiritual implications rather than a strict future-orientated prophecy. Okay, so for Origen, the coming of the Son of Man can be realized in the soul of the believer when they receive Christ spiritually. Think about that. The coming of the Son of Man can be realized in the soul of the believer when they accept this spiritually. So it's this imminent reality in Origen's mindset, which I think is wonderful. I think that's a really healthy way to look at it. And indeed, even if you're a futurist, you're kind of given that sort of instruction to perceive it that way. So it's interesting. He saw prophetic fulfillment as an ongoing spiritual sort of reality rather than a future apocalyptic event. Very interesting. So he saw prophetic fulfillments as ongoing spiritual realities rather than apocalyptic events. How insightful, because we often today hear about, it's that, everything's melting in fervent heat. It's the end of space-time. Well, here's Origen with a rather refreshing take, although it shouldn't be refreshing because it was made almost 2,000 years ago, but we didn't treat it properly. And again, going back to the point I made at the start of this video about being locked into different algorithms of thought, sometimes we're just held captive, we're bound up in those webs of experience, and that kind of tug us in the wrong direction, or we just lose the agility of thought necessary. But Origen didn't seem to lack that agility, and I'm glad he didn't. So he highlights the importance of 70 AD or AD 70. He said that the end of the Jewish temple system and full eschatology of the church as the true Israel. I didn't sound like a sentence to me, but it's my note, so let me try it again. The end of the Jewish temple system and the full establishment of the church as the true Israel. Okay, so that's what happened in AD 70, which I agree with. Yeah, I think that's true. We saw the establishment of the church as the true Israel. And then we have to ask ourselves, well, what's the significance of that? What does that actually mean eschatologically? So I think that our man Alexandria, no, that's not his name, he's Origen of Alexandria. Origen, I think he's probably the strongest case. I know I've put Eusebius' name in the title because why not? He's, the historian a lot of people speak about in early church history. But Origen, the coming of the Son of Man is realized in the soul of the believer when they receive Christ spiritually. That's potent. That's powerful stuff. That's Proto-Preterism. I'm claiming it. And then we have Augustine of Hippo. Everyone's heard of Augustine of Hippo. Very interestingly, Augustine of Hippo, I wasn't aware of his argument. So I did the video on the binding of Satan. I didn't realize that was an Augustine argument. and he used the same text to justify it as I have done. I think it's an intuitive thing. We've probably all been there in our heads. But isn't it nice to know that that is shared by Augustine of Hippo? So he made the idea, the kingdom of God already realized in the church. Okay. And this, again, it goes in with this idea of realized eschatology. He saw the 1,000 years as the current church age. I don't know if anyone out there watching this video agrees with that. I don't, but I can see it. I understand what Augustine is saying here. The binding of Satan is symbolic of Christ's first coming. Well, yeah, it is symbolic of Christ's first coming. So that would be why he would think that he was within that 1,000-year reign, because you have to place that in that sort of context, don't you? The binding of Satan, the 1,000-year reign. Well, here's Augustine saying, I'm saying that weird, Augustine saying the binding of Satan happened in Christ's first coming and the spread of the gospel rather than the future. So that's a really nice commendation to that video I put out in the binding of Satan, something we've discussed on this channel. And I think it makes the point that, and this is, I'm not really going to take this much further. I'm just going to look to the comments for you guys' thoughts on this kind of thing. So the main topics of today in this video, I'm going to do another video maybe in a couple hours time, but the idea that how we think needs to change, that we have to be unburdened by what has been. I'm only joking. I just think that's a ridiculous statement. I mean, no offense to anyone who supports that hideous witch. I'm only joking, guys. No politics, please. No politics. But I think we have to be unburdened by what has been. You know what I mean? We have to let go of the shackles of fear and the accusations of heresy. What was it I said in that past video? I responded to the charge of us being heretical, evil, and unbiblical. We cannot let that touch us. I want you to imagine Neo in the first Matrix film when Agent Smith fires those bullets in that final scene, and the bullets just slow down and fall to the ground and they don't touch Neo. That's what we need to realize. That's who we are. And these agents of Satan, I mean, in a sense, right? I'm not one for using provocative language without then immediately neutralizing it with I'm only joking. But when you really think about it, guys, these people are our adversary and we are the champions of truth. I don't mean to be so provocative. I'm just having fun tonight. I had a Snickers, so I'm a little bit excited, but it's true. These people, these futurists, they make these kinds of accusations. Not all of them. Some of them are really lovely, respectful, cordial people, but others, like the ones hosted on Inspiring Philosophies, whatever that was, very close-minded, very severe personalities, and they turn themselves into, real opposition. They shouldn't do that. They should meet us with the spirit that is becoming of a Christian, however they fail to. So let's be mindful of that. That's something that's up for discussion. But then also the idea that the early church fathers are not beholden to them. They don't belong to them. The history has been shaped in the way that it has been, but human history is still very early, particularly recorded history. I'm optimistic. I want to believe we have another fair few thousand years in the future. Let's just say human civilization continues for another 10,000 years or more. We're just in the beginning chapters. We're at the origin point. And we then are so much closer to Christ than someone alive 10,000 years in the future. So we can still steer this ship in the right direction. But we don't have to do it by the facts, right? Because it's not an extremity of information. It's an extremity of emotion that causes the opposition. All we need to do is warm warm the waters a little bit, okay? Move it from that lukewarm stuff that just vomit out the mouth, and turn to something a bit more palatable. All right, turning over here now to look at some of these comments. Sonic says the second coming has to do with the revelation of Jesus, no longer separated from him. Absolutely. And how absurd and how disgraceful it is for anyone to turn round to us after hearing such a thing and tell us, you don't have it, you are evil. I would be guarded against doing something like that because, I don't know what your interpretation of it is. Mine is probably not quite as severe as the text leads on to believe, but the unforgivable sin, which sounds something like qualifying the works of the Holy Spirit as evil, right? I think it's more if you're stuck in that mindset, then it's an unpardonable thing. It's a damnable thing because you're locked into failure and futility if you see the works of the Holy Spirit as evil. So I would be very guarded against that, okay? Did I just call futurists the agents of Satan 5 seconds ago? I might have done. But not seriously. As I said, there's some really nice people, but those who would make the accusation that we are unbiblical and evil, come on. That's not who we are. That's not what we're all about. It's not what we're all about. Did I also confess to murdering people and hiding the bodies at the start of this video? Yeah, I did, okay? But the thing is, we forgive and we move on. I'm just playing, guys. I'm just playing. Everyone from every generation must come to this understanding. And that's the test, Sonic. That's the test. And I think it needs to be difficult. I think it's part of the texture of being a human being, It's not about an elegant, smooth, lubricated ride into correction. You know what I mean? It's about the gristle. It's about the sawdust, right? It's about the sandpaper, right? What am I talking about? Talking about the difficulty of navigating a human life. And it's not a bug. It's a feature, as they say in software design. It's not a bug. It's a feature. And software designers should have a better idea. What was it? The software development cycle, analysis, design, analysis, design, implementation to, I don't know what the T stands, like add it them, analysis, design, implementation, testing, the documentation, evaluation, and maintenance, right? And that's what we should be doing with our approach. If you look at the church, that's what we should be doing with it. And as our guiding principle, truth, Christ, light, God, love, and all these things synthesized together. You're talking about the same thing. You're talking about Jesus, you're talking about God. If you're talking about love, you're talking about God. And that's the way it has to be. And that's what we need to use to guide this whole thing and correct this broken ship, I mean, again, I look at the world and I despair, right? And it's not a good thing. Despair is a sin. If you listen to the Catholic Church, which they have wisdom too, I'm not going to denigrate the Catholic Church. Despair is a sin because it's almost like hopelessness. It's almost like giving up. But you look to Pakistan and you look at the rate of marriages between first cousins, the rate of marriages between siblings. And if you don't know it, a quick Google search. And I've got nothing, some really wonderful Pakistani people. I know some, but the culture and what's going on over there, it needs Christ. It needs love. And I don't say that in some, people often worry about colonialism and things like that. This is not a physical colonialism. This is a spiritual practice. If you marry your first cousin, you lower the IQ of the child that is born. You lower the IQ and you ruin their social mobility. There are things they will never be able to do because of the the mutations that occur when you go with someone as closely related as that. Things like that, right? Corruption in the government. Take America, for example, right? Let's just create an imaginary political party, right? I don't even have to. So, how many delegates do you have in the USA, like the Congress and the senators and stuff? Somebody said it was, is it like 200? 500 sounds too many, right? But you've got a number of delegates, you got a number of congressmen and whatever else, right? Governors. But then you've also got these other people who represent big pharma, who represent military industrial complex. And they've got, was it something like they've got 1,800 representatives. So you as Americans, you only get, what, 200 odd people to voice your concerns? Whereas all these big corporations, they've got over 1,000 people to represent their concerns. So you might think as an American, am I really represented? Do I have a voice? Who has their hands in my governor's pockets, in my senator's pockets, in the congressman's pockets? Who's filling them? Who's threatening them? Who's tempting them? What is it? Is it a good representative democracy? You don't use that term in America, do you? What's the term you use? You're not a democracy. You're a republic. Is that what you say? Aye. So you're supposed to be represented by these people, but are you? I would wonder. And I think, I don't know. That's what I see going on in the world. And that's why I'm attracted to a certain personality type. I was talking before about intellectual traps and being bound in webs that stifle motion in the direction of truth. Well, that happens in many offices in this world, and especially in politics. And people become so entangled, they're embroiled, they're enmeshed in scandal. You're bought over multiple times. You may have started off with noble pursuits, but you're corrupted. You're the seed that perhaps fell on the infertile ground and nothing germinates. And you see that in politics. You see someone in their 70s getting into their advanced years in their career, and you think, what did they achieve? What did they do? What is their legacy? And it might be that they had to corrupt themselves to get anywhere at all. But did they really have to do that? Did they have to do that? I think that's why virtue dies in politics quite a lot. And it's a shame that we almost need a billionaire class to run, you know? It's like you need someone who cannot be bought. So you've got to hope for the benevolent billionaire to come out, millionaire to come out, someone who cannot be bought, and that hopefully has an inclination towards celebrating freedom. Is that good? Is that right for me to speak on that? I think so. I think that's the kind of truth. You know, I think truth needs to be served in every kind of institution, in the government, in the media, and if you're in the UK, in the monarchy, whatever it is, whatever the institution is, truth should be celebrated. Compassion, love, all these associated things. There's Joe Fisher. Hello, Joe. The truth always comes against pride. It's true, the truth always does come against pride. Pride is this visceral, vindictive, insidious force in humanity. It's been there in the church. And I thank Shade for highlighting the humanity of the early church fathers and the humanity of the people who operate in the church. Someone once said that the church is a bureaucracy. It's a man-made bureaucracy, and God allows it to fail, right? The church is not above reproach. The church is a bureaucracy, right? And in that bureaucracy, pride will reside. Pride will work its way in. It's part of who we are. It's part of the human condition. It's here as a thorn in our sides. It's doing things to us. It's opposing us. Catch it. Notice it. That is the discipline of the Christian. if I dare to use the term. It's the discipline of the Christ follower. It's the discipline of the Christ spirit. Identify it. Identify it. See it. See it. Get behind me, Satan. You got to see it in your best friend. You got to see it in yourself. Identify it, and then it's easier to deal with. Oh, there you are. So I'll tell you something that happened. I was writing something that I thought was quite important to write about, and somebody brushed it off. Somebody brushed off what I was writing about, and it was like a very sensitive subject matter, and it meant a lot to me. And somebody was just like, "Oh, as if that's more important than this thing." And I felt this anger rise inside me, like venomous anger. I mean, I was imagining things in my head, like I was Stone Cold Steve Austin, you know what I mean? And then I noticed it, then I just watched it. I came apart, right? I wasn't that thing. I was watching what was happening in my body. I could feel the adrenaline and everything else. And I said, no. I said, no, I get to make a choice. I don't have to have this pride where, oh, I've just been wounded. A piece of information was processed in my brain, and now I'm going to turn into, what, a cannonball? No, I'm not. And then just see the feeling that gives you. That is to overcome the world. That is to become a seasoned veteran of Jesus Christ's Spirit. You know what I mean? Work that magic. You just called it magic. All right, you know what I mean? Pride says I'm right and everybody else is wrong. Absolutely, it does. And I think you need to, again, speaking about the intellectual humility. So if someone was to find this video and tear it apart and be like, oh, he said the early church fathers are proto-preterists. Yeah, what a moron. Who would say such a thing? I have already run that in my head. It's already happened. I've already reacted to it. Do you know how I reacted to it? With love, with forgiveness. I've already anticipated all the evils that could possibly occur. I believe. I've seen a lot of movies, right? And I've already forgiven them. And I genuinely believe that to be true, you know. I've suffered loss. I've had a relative accidentally killed by someone. And it's hurtful, but I forgave that immediately. Oh my God, of course I did. What if that was me? What if it was me driving? What if it was me that was hit? I don't want to live in a world full of hate and vengeance. I want to live in a world full of love and forgiveness and togetherness and unity. Yeah. Sometimes I'm wrong. Sometimes they're wrong. And the response should always be love, forgiveness, all the stuff that comes from it. Constitutional republic, that's exactly what I was thinking of. Yeah, you guys got it going on there. Lobbyists perform a legalized form of criminality. They absolutely do. It's disgusting. It's disgusting, and we see it for what it is, you know. I'm all for capitalism. I think, you know, the arguments have been made. Until capitalism, industrialization and stuff kicked off, we all lived in squalor and in poverty and in disease. The world really revved up after like the 1880s, you know what I mean? Moving towards deindustrialization, which I don't know if it was that great. Moving all of our manufacturing to China. But we did that here in the UK too. We moved all our manufacturing away. We need some autonomy at home, I think. But, you know, I don't want to get too much into politics. We can do politics, world building together at some point using a preterist perspective, whatever that might be. Let's decide what that is. Yeah, Boston. Out there. I mean, Boston, I'd probably integrate into Boston a bit easier. Well, New England in general, a wee bit easier. Pro wrestling references, that's right. I'm cutting promos here, you know what I mean? Genesis. Oh, that reminds me, I'm going to share a scripture in a second. Genesis 8, 21 to 22 is an overlooked promise from the heart of God, and it describes the world we live in. Well, let's see if that's true, my friend. Let's see if that's true as we jump over to this here. Genesis 8:22. Did I lose? Where the heck is it? Genesis 8. Just going to add it here. So I made a point earlier about how the coming of the kingdom, which the early church fathers were saying was present, and I do believe was consummated, is so neatly linked to the coming of Christ. Daniel 7, okay. I was watching in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven. He came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. Then to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom the one which shall not be destroyed. So there's a kingdom without end. Okay, so there's powerful language there. We have the idea of one like the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven, and he's coming with this kingdom. He's given this kingdom, and it shan't pass away. Okay, it's a little bit ambiguous, but we move towards this. Matthew 16. For the Son of Man will come in the glory of his Father with his angels, and then he will reward each according to his works. Assuredly, I say to you, there are some standing here who shall not taste death till they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. And remember, Jesus' message was the kingdom is at hand, right? So we might wonder, well, what does that mean? When was it not present right there and then? And I would say, well, the idea was that I think it's referred to as the already but not yet kind of concept, which when 70 AD came around, very much was. Mark 9:1. And he said to them, assuredly I say to you, that there are some standing here who shall not taste death till they see the kingdom of God present with power. Now, it says here transfiguration, which it goes on to talk about, but that's certainly not what Jesus is talking about, because it doesn't make any sense for him to say there's some standing here who will not taste death, and then I don't know how much time transpires in the story, but it's like obviously we know that Jesus' ministry was only 3 years, so it's not like that would be some qualifying statement to make. Oh, there's some who will not taste death in 3 years. I'd be like, yeah, of course, man. I have a life expectancy hopefully longer than 3 freaking years. So I think it's clear to say here this connection between the kingdom and the return of Christ is, it's very integrated. And that language there in Mark 9, very familiar with Matthew 16. Some standing here shall not taste death till they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. And that's a little point that I think makes some sense and is worth talking about. Now, let's look at that Genesis verse that we've just been reminded of. Genesis 8. And the Lord smelled a soothing aroma. Then the Lord said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground for man's sake, although the imaginings of man's heart is evil from his youth, nor will I again destroy every living thing as I have done. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, winter and summer, and day and night shall not cease. So when people read in Peter and the epistles about the elements burning up with fervent heat, what they are interpreting is something that contradicts the express intention of God to sustain this world. And so clearly, Peter is not talking about those things. In fact, when we look a little further, we can understand that Peter is talking about the end of the old covenant, right? He's talking about the end of that system, the end of covenant Israel. And I think that makes a lot of sense. Alrighty. So so it's only 6 days later, right? Which makes it even more absurd, There are some standing here who shall not taste death until Wednesday next week. It's like, dude, why are you saying it like that? Okay, you're making me nervous. It just doesn't make any sense. God bless from New York City. Absolutely. New York City is a good place. New Amsterdam. I'd like to go there. West Village, yeah, West Village. New Jersey. Sorry, I don't know why I'm doing that. Manhattan, isn't it? West Side. I don't know what I'm talking about. All through the scripture, the end was for the corrupt, not the righteous. That's right. That's right. They would be gathered up and burnt as chaff. The fire Jesus sends is truth. And that's it. You know, God is a consuming fire. There is the talk of a refiner's fire. You will be saved as if through fire. We sometimes pollute the idea of fire with the idea of agonizing torment, but I don't think the agonizing torment is there. It doesn't define the quality of the fire in such an extreme sense. I can imagine that the work of refinement could be excruciating. That makes sense to me. But I don't think it's the purpose of it. I think instead it's a tool. The fire is a tool. The fire is a instrument that's trying to serve you, that's trying to imbue you with purity, so to speak. Born-again believers are evidence of the kingdom's presence with power. The best evidence there ever is, there ever will be. It takes born-again believers. We need a society of born-again believers if we want to have some kind of sustenance, where two or more are gathered in my name, there I am also. And it can be a lonely world when you don't get to experience fellowship, It's nice to see other people manifesting the Spirit. You identify it. It's so much more readily identifiable when you see it outside your own self. Not to say you can't be sustained by it, yourself, that irreducible core of God's love burns away inside us, you know what I mean? Never loses its potency. But we can feel down. We can feel lonely and sad and go through that negative stuff I was talking about that's built into the system. But yeah, I think we need to do more to highlight the light and to bring together communities of light. How do you do it? It's a tricky task, especially when, again, we are evil, we are unbiblical, we are heretics, according to the futurists. It makes it so much more difficult. No one wants to masquerade. No one wants to pretend. Everybody just likes, when you're with family, when you're with loved ones, and you can relax into who you are with all of your faults and everything else. Don't you want that? Don't you want a community of that? There's no pressure. There's no anxiety. There's no background noise. There's no shimmering tension. You can just relax in the knowledge that you're in the Spirit. You're all held in the Spirit. It's like a beautiful, beautiful big family unit with massive impenetrable city walls, and no dark plan will pierce those walls, That's what we need. Iowa, Northeast Iowa. Iowa's had a lot of chat recently, hasn't it? Iowa's one of those states that seems important for something. I forget what it was. The Iowa caucus. I've heard a lot about the Iowa caucus. Where is Iowa? Is that one of those middle states? Is that near Michigan? I can't place it. I think it is, right? It's one of the kind of middle states, Iowa. You get like New England. If New England's over here, Iowa would be over here, somewhere beside one of these states. I don't know. I can't quite place it. Upper Midwest, that makes sense. Is it got Great Lakes? You got access to the Great Lakes in Iowa. I can kind of picture it. Difficulty draws us closer to God. This world is necessary for us to learn to trust Him. Absolutely. Because the natural state would just be this, of course, just a absolute taken for granted unity with God, almost inseparable, almost like there would be no distinction. We would just be part of that one. It would just be as if we are God, right? It's in that separateness of God creating children, then you put those children in an environment where there's limitation, and then suddenly there's contrast. And where there's contrast, there's distinction. Where there's distinction, there's choice and character and personality that can grow and that can form in these unique ways, you know? And I like to think that at the end of this, if, I don't know about reincarnation, all that, but I think we bring all that experience back, like sitting around a campfire and telling your stories, And God's there as our loving Father, learning through us, operating through us. I don't know, it's a big mystery, isn't it? But it's wonderful. Jesus is the truth. Eschatological differences should be left up to divine mystery, secondary, not separating believers from each other. Absolutely, Stephen. Absolutely. You know what? That is very much it. That is it. Even as like someone who wants to be a torchbearer for full preterism and speaking on its value, historically, it's not like something I did in the past and I've stopped doing now. I just mean I would express it more clearly in previous videos, the idea that I don't need you to be a full preterist. I don't need that. I don't want that for you necessarily. I just want people to be good to the best of their ability. Do I want that? I think I want that because I think it's what the Father wants, and I'm trying to bring my will into the Father's will. Again, I'm not going to force anyone, and I really don't think it matters what you score in my theology test or anyone else's theology test. I just know that the way we're orientated right now seems to be in the way of truth. And as a consequence of that, we're talking about full preterism. And all it is a wee signal to say we're on the right path, perhaps. And I say perhaps because I don't want to be overly confident. I want to maintain intellectual humility. I want to be open to being wrong because I've been wrong before. And I don't want to be proud. And I don't want to have that steer me into an aggressive posture, that aggressive posture that often happens in politics. So there's ways we can neutralize that. And that's just by maintaining humility. But not so far as we cripple ourselves, paralyze ourselves to choice. So you'll have heard of the Frankfurt School. They invented the idea of critical theory. And one of the theorists was a guy called Adorno. I forget his first name. Adorno is it something? Heimer? What was his name? Horkheimer, Adorno, and Marcuse. Anyways, Adorno had this thing called negative dialectics. And that's an excruciating, tormenting mindset for me because all this negative dialectics is identifying issues in society and not trying to solve them, because that's not part of it, because that's not how history works. We shouldn't be trying to solve the problems because we can't, and we should be wary against offering simple solutions. Not that he even offers a complex one, but he's just like, right, we need to notice the contradictions in society. So, for example, you take capitalism and say it brings about freedom, but it doesn't, let's say, because certain people who accumulate wealth, they own more of the means of production. There's accessibility issues because people can't afford to get into the marketplace to sell the products. If you're too poor, you can't even buy the resources to begin with. So he would notice a problem like that. Whereas someone like Hegel, he has just dialectics where he looks at the thesis, which is that capitalism should bring about freedom and prosperity. And then he would say, well, the antithesis to that is the fact, the problems that Adorno highlighted, where there is problems of access and people accumulating wealth and people being poor and all that. So then the synthesis would be to remedy that, right? To, make sure we regulate the markets to stop monopolies and stuff like that. Not too much regulation, but just enough regulation to stop monopolies and stuff like that. And Hegel would say that's the point of humanity, to move forward, to progress. But Adorno didn't believe in progress, much like Foucault, who's all these terrible ideas come out of France, Germany, and Austria, so I've noticed. And they just had this idea that history isn't progressive. It's not linear in terms of it's moving towards some utopian ideal. That's the kind of communist idea as well. But it's also quasi-religious, right? Because I think we all hope that we're moving towards something positive. But a lot of these people would suggest that we're not, which I can kind of see. Like, history's just these calamitous and fortuitous events that are just kind of happening, not necessarily sequentially, but just reactively. And we just stumbling through. Again, like the path of the moth, right? I talked about the moth being attracted to the light and how it squiggles around and it's not a direct path, like a graceful owl, very quiet, very sleek, just straight to. I think that's kind of like what they're getting at. I don't want to vilify them too much because a lot of people vilify these thinkers. I don't know a lot about them. I just Googled their names over this week to try and understand some highbrow political chat I was listening to. Yeah, futurist seems not to understand we are united by faith, no longer divided by doctrine, denomination theology, or our own opinions. I think that's it. I think the problem with the church is its inelegance. It's not spiritual. It is a bureaucracy, and it presents the enemy as the same thing. It's sort of like how some people are so dug into seeing Russia as like this massive area. I'm not saying that Russia's not got sinister ideations, but it's not the same force it was during the Cold War. Like a lot of people who grew up during the Cold War, I think, say they fucking, sorry, I swore, say those Russians, say those are mad Ruskies, but they're not the same enemy that they were. I would say that there's more pressing existential issues right at home in your government operating right now, the people telling you that they're the good guys, watch out, you know what I mean? And as again, I don't know what to make of this, but in Russia, over the last 10 years, I forget the exact statistics, but in Russia in the last 10 years, they arrested 200 people for things they posted on social media. In the United Kingdom, over the last 2 years, we've arrested 2,000 people for things they've posted on social media. And I don't know the exact figures, right? But it's something shocking, right? And obviously there's reasons for that. You could say, well, people in Russia, they watch this, they're very careful. That's why they're not getting arrested as much. But here in the UK, in the United Kingdom, we're arresting people for hurting people's feelings. Some people who are trying to instigate violence, they need to be arrested, but some of it's extremely petty. For example, there was the young woman who posted a rap lyric because her good friend had died, and she posted the favourite song, and the favourite song contained the N-word. She was arrested. She was taken before a judge. She was prosecuted. She was charged, and then she was fined. And then only after all of that, because it got a lot of scrutiny, they, washed their hands of it, so to speak. But that doesn't make it okay that we did that terrible thing. And I think that speaks to the lack of grace and the lack of the spirit in the hearts of the people ruling the country. And I'm not saying we need to take over the country, guys, right? We do, but I'm not saying that. No, it's very small microcosms of love. That's all we need to bring in to change the whole system. All we need to do is be good to one person every day, one person every week. Just try to make our interactions be good and wholesome and loving. Know when to hold them, know when to fold them, right? That's all it is. God is not mocked. Sowing bad seed always produces a predictable crop in the old covenant and the new, as long as the earth remains. That is so true. That is such wise words. Yeah, you know exactly what's going to come. And you've seen that in organizations you've worked in. You've seen it with people coming into a situation. You're like, oh, this is going to go bad. This person right here, I know this person, or this person right here. They've just revealed themselves to be a certain kind of person. No harm to them. Wishing them all the best, but this is going to go badly. I've seen that happen in organizations, But even just the intentions, the ethos of a project. You're like, oh no, this is I know it seems to be good. I know that you're trying to present this as a good thing, but I can see that this project has a very dark root, and this is not going to work out. And it's about being able. I think you identify that through experience. You don't want to get too conspiratorial and too mystical about that. Make that practical. Like, right, I can see this is going to go wrong because this person doesn't know what they're talking about. They're not an expert. They're bringing in a bunch of ideas that we know haven't worked in the past. Keep yourself grounded when you're making these observations, or else people will just think you're crazy. We got an original Idahoan in there. Nice. Still, Boston will be nice. Boston's the upgrade, right? Boston's the upgrade, is it? I don't know. Good culture in Boston, I would imagine. Boston Tea Party and all that. I had my feelings hurt once. Yeah. Well, that's that, isn't it? I think it's good that we get our feelings hurt. Man, I've had my feelings hurt. It's sucky. It's like someone's taking a vacuum. I've never had liposuction, but it's almost like if you get really hurt, it's like someone's just vacuumed you out, right? It's like someone's just caught you on a lure, reeled you in, and just taken out everything, and you're just like hollow. And you're just lurking around like a ghost haunting, looking for meaning again, But the good news is it does come. I think everyone has to experience something of that heart because it makes you. It can break you sometimes, and it's not necessarily a bad thing to be broken sometimes, but it makes you. It builds perseverance and time. Oh, time is a great teacher because you realize the severity with which you received that heart. Man, it really ain't all that. It really ain't all that in the long run, depending on what we're talking about. But I'm talking about like a girl, right? Or it may be a boy, or depending on your situation. But when you get hurt, come on. That's just putting you on the right path for your destiny, ultimately. Know when to walk away. Yes, you got to know when to walk away. Know when to run. Yeah, man. You got to know, because sometimes the worst thing you've seen someone do is stay in a situation that's not right. That whole idea of casting your peril before swine. If you stay enmeshed and embroiled in a terrible situation, it will start to cost you. You'll feel it. And I think that's some kind of spiritual warfare, right? I have been cautious. So I went from someone, again, I told you, who was wanting to be the OG of Christianity, young earth, no evolution, everything's really literal from the Bible. I went from that person to much more contemplative and open-minded about things, right? Not to pursue liberalism, hyper-liberalism, as some people might characterize it, but just to be truthful and to be honest and to follow what I think is the truest interpretation. So I kind of moved away from talking about demons and Satan and dark forces and malevolence, because it didn't seem practical, and it seemed very mystical and airy-fairy and weird. But I actually think that language is calling a spade sometimes. Everybody knows what you're talking about when you use that language, right? And the language of like spiritual warfare, sometimes I think it's a wee bit cringe. You know what I mean? Like, people are using that and it's just a bit overly used. But now I'm starting to think it's actually kind of appropriate. And as you survey the land, as it has become more atheistic, I'm seeing a lot of atheists long for Christian tradition. And I think with that comes the vernacular of the Christian as well. Not to say that it's all good, but these clear ideas, to call something demonic, to call something satanic, it's just so self-evident what we're talking about. It's like calling something love or lovely. You know what it means, right? If you call someone a lovely person, it's disarming. If you call someone a demonic person, you think, oh, they're a bit of a psychopath. They're out for themselves. They don't care about anyone else. They're a narcissist. They just want to serve their own bloody purpose. Yeah, that's it, And I think I've made this point before. Humans can be incredibly evil. And that's a word sometimes I would again try to stay away from, because I feel like it's too attached to things that are maybe a bit too mystical and grandiose and inaccessible. But I don't really believe that anymore. I think everyone knows evil is evil. And it's evident. It's self-evident. Anyone who encounters it just knows that it's a thing. Some people have called it dysfunction. It's an express dysfunction. It's an express chaos. But I have the thesis that human beings are more evil than demons. That might sound weird to hear, because I don't know if I'm just saying that to stimulate conversation, but I think human beings are more evil than demons, because I've never seen a demon do anything particularly evil, but I have seen human beings do things. I've not even seen them, I've heard of it. Because if you can find videos, but you don't want to watch them, human beings are probably the most evil creatures in the universe, man. The things they do, it doesn't bear talking about. Then if you can feel that in your soul, the dark place I'm going with that, human beings, man, I think human beings are 1,000 times more evil than any demon. But I think the demons enjoy that, you know what I mean? I think they're all in it together, you know what I mean? Maybe the point of separation doesn't exist, right? This is one's a tool for the other, and they piggyback off each other. It's sort of like the opposite of a relationship with God. Like, I wouldn't say human beings are more good than angels, right? Human beings are more righteous than angels. It might be true. It might be true that it is actually in some way more righteous to be in a human body and act righteously. That might take something more than just being an angel who doesn't have an experience of temptation. But I don't think it's appropriate to say that. I think it would be more appropriate to say that that relationship is almost symbiotic, right? It's with God and angels and humans all doing together. And it's just one express sort of experience. And perhaps it's the same with the evil side. Maybe I shouldn't say that human beings are far more evil. Maybe I should just say it's like a symbiotic thing where the evil and the human come together to manifest the toxicity that they bring into this world. I don't know. Don't know what anyone thinks about that. Yes, let's see. Well, it reveals the spiritual nature of a person. Yeah, Jesus had no problem telling them their father was the devil. That's right. I mean, Jesus did speak in such candid terms. So, yeah, that's that. You know, I mean, early church fathers, they were flawed people. They didn't have it all down, but they lived good lives. And the point's been made in the chat. It doesn't matter that the early church fathers didn't share my theology. It doesn't matter that I cannot put them in the same category as me, because that is not that's not a problem, and it's not the project. So if anyone was to find this video and think, well, what a ridiculous thing, you can't see he couldn't even make it work. He couldn't even put those people into the full preterist camp. Well, first of all, I wasn't trying to do that. And secondly, it's tangential. It's secondary. I'm trying to stimulate a conversation for sure. I'm trying to make a point, of course. You know, that's part of the discourse. But it's not so cherished. It's not so important to me. It's better that we just have the ability to talk. It's better that I can use that as a foot in the door to talk about what we're talking about now, right? And I think that's what all life is. That's what medicine should be. That's what, you know what I mean? That's what politics should be. That's what teaching should be. You come to the classroom to learn 2 + 2 = 4, but maybe you also learn what it means to be a human being and to show a bit of charity. I remember I did a math lesson in a primary school, and I got these treasure chests and I filled them with wee goodies, and I opened up the treasure chest. And the kids were kind of fighting amongst themselves because there was only one particular toy in there, and a couple of kids wanted it. And the kid that picked out the cherished toy saw someone kind of really upset, and then they handed it. They handed the cherished toy that they wanted to the really upset child. And they were so happy to receive that. And then I was able to lavish my praise upon that child for doing that. I said, that was such a wonderful and beautiful thing to do. And I just want everyone in the class to acknowledge that. And then it went crazy, man, because then all the kids started picking out toys and giving them to each other because they saw the praise I'd given this child. And so they all picked out toys. Oh, my God. That's beautiful, man. You know what I mean? Like, that's what life should be. I think it was a wee bit cynical. Because I think I don't know if I promised them all extra special toys for being so cool, and then that was what made them do that. But that's beautiful, man. You know, I think that's the wee chain reaction. You know, obviously that's just wee kids. They don't have this fully sophisticated, messed up brains of adults. You know, we're a bit more complicated, but wee stuff like that. You know, just affecting stuff like that. I think Gary DeMar has a book out there showing more preterist references from the early writers that are getting translated still. Yeah, I think, isn't Gary DeMar, like, he's the guy when you're looking at these kind of patristic writings and the early church fathers and all that jazz. He's the one to look at, isn't he? I think even Don Preston makes reference to DeMar on that front. Have they ever interacted, I wonder? They must have interacted, but I don't know if they've ever had a debate. They need to, man. Come on. I do like Gary's approach to governance. Starts with the home and grows outward. Yeah, I think that's a very intuitive way to do it. You know, it's that whole idea of order, bringing order into your own life and then manifesting that communally, you know, do it in your own town, try and bring it to the county, try and bring it to the larger county and in the whole country, maybe. I mean, I'm starting to, like, I've actually got the ambition to write a manifesto, which would sound intimidating if I was wearing a long leather jacket and had sunglasses on, but it's not a kind of manifesto. And what I'm talking about, guys, is some kind of political movement. And you could start one in your hometown as an independent, but just some kind of political party, because there's going to be room for that in Scotland soon. The Scottish National Party are not doing so well. Their politics isn't so great. Labour's probably going to push them out. And I think there's room for a new political party. And there are, like, the Scottish Family Party has started up. It's kind of got a Christian accent. Not quite my tempo, though. I think I would do it slightly differently, so I'm going to try. I'll take a bit of time with it, though, because I don't want to, you know, shoot for the hip with something like that, because you're going to attract a lot of scrutiny. I do. That's good. I'm glad to hear the email back and forth. And that's the way it should be. We should always keep open discourse, even with people that we kind of disagree with a little bit. Not that they might not disagree on anything, but I imagine they might just a little. Okay, so wow, really? Has that been an hour and 13 minutes? So I've got a couple other topics. I don't want to pollute this one a little bit too much with other topics. I think maybe this evening, I might talk about the problem of good. You've all heard of the problem of evil. I might talk about the problem of good and visit a couple other little things. That's more of a philosophical point I'll try and make there. I'll see if I can add some other little cool stuff to discuss. But yeah, there we go. Eusebius, Proto-Preterism, Patristic Preterism, early church fathers, and the end times. And also how to save the world. We kind of got that in there as well. So yeah, no, thank you everyone for checking this video out. The last video I did there was on prophecy. I put it out, I kind of snuck it out early in the morning where not many people would see it, because it was kind of it's not the usual sort of tone of the channel, but I just thought near-death experiences and the kind of future visions people are having is an interesting thing, especially after the Trump assassination. And then there was that fellow who said, "Oh, I predicted that," and we kind of looked at that a little bit. That guy's been firing out prophecies like he's got Tourette's or something, like every day. "Oh, I've saw a vision, guys." It's like, dude, calm down. You know what I mean? But I was curious. people who've got near-death experiences do have some kind of, I don't know, really curious and interesting testimonies. So I compiled some information and made a little thematic analysis on some of the more outstanding elements of these visions. So it's there to check out. Anyways, guys, God bless. Have a lovely day. I might check in with you in a couple hours. Okay. Again, this has actually been really nice, guys. It really has. Thank you. God bless.